Hi book friends, this is Kat. Welcome or welcome back to my channel. So for today's video, I have a mid-month wrap-up. I already have read a total of 6 books and I wanted to get this video out this week because I found that last month I had a lot of books that I did talk about and I got really tired towards the end, so I'm hoping this mid-month review would be better as far as like more fresh. The books are more fresh on my mind and I'm able to communicate better through my thoughts. And it's also a shorter video. So I'm going to go ahead and just do the same thing that I do with my regular month wrap-ups. So I'm going to start with my rating. I had 2 books that were rated 2.5 stars, 1 book that was rated 3 stars, 1 book that was rated 4.5 stars, and 2 books that are rated 5 stars. Now, I'm going to go ahead and tell you that the 5-star reads were the books The Edge of Belonging by Amanda Cox and Long Way Gone by Charles Martin. But since I've already done a review over those 2 books, I'm not going to go into detail with those. So I won't be talking about the 5-star ratings, but they are very good books and I would encourage you to check out the other video that I've posted previously to this one. So now that we have that done, I'm going to go ahead and talk about my first 2.5 star book. And that one is going to be a manga, and it's Those Not So Sweet Boys by Yoko Norigiri, and I cannot pronounce the name. This also stood in for my prompt, The Gargoyles from Hunchback of Notre Dame. Read a book from a genre you don't usually read from. I don't read from manga hardly. I mean, last time I read one manga was in 5th grade. And other than that, I haven't picked up one yet since now. But I'm going to go ahead and tell you the premise of the book. The book is there is a young girl who is part of this very nice school, and part of the requirements of this high school is that she cannot work at a job while she attends this. And her mother is working, and the job is not enough to help pay for the bills. So the young girl, in fact, is working a job and she gets found out. But the superintendent cuts her a deal saying if she can get these 3 boys back into school, he could help provide for her another job that would pay better and would be approved by the board. So that's what her task is with this, and you get to understand why these boys chose not to go to school and what the deal is with their circumstances, and you get a little bit more about like her circumstances at home, and it ensues from there. So I right off the bat just found that I am just not a big fan of reading manga. I think that's what it was. The storyline was intriguing. I am a teacher, so I do enjoy some like school setting books, but I guess I wasn't it wasn't too fond about the school board manipulation part, I guess. I knew that going into the book, but I guess it didn't realize that it kind of did bug me a little more than what I thought it would. But it was a interesting premise. I did like learning about the school system. The book does tell you a little bit about how the school system worked in this area. I'm not sure where the system is. It's okay, it says right here. It's in Japan. So it tells you a little bit about the grading system and helps, you understand a lot what they're talking about. So that was interesting, but I also found that there was skimming on some inappropriateness, at least not with these boys or any of the girls, but some other group of kids when they almost took advantage of her in a way. And I didn't really like that part. But I realized that manga was just not something that I typically enjoy at all. So the whole reading backwards to forwards, backwards, I didn't particularly liked, but also just I'm not into the whole anime drawings and just anime itself. Not as much. There's just so much of it, I guess, I can take. So unfortunately, it was not a favorite, and I probably won't pick up manga just because I realized as I was reading through it that I just didn't like reading manga. So you learn something new, but I was glad to give it a try. I didn't see like bad scenes. There was a little bit of cursing in each part, but overall it was just a okay read for me. So okay, the next book I'm going to talk about is actually an audiobook, and it is actually the second book in a series. So I'm just going to jump ahead to my 3-star rating, and then I'll come back to the 2.5-star rating to make more sense of the book. But to my 3-star rating, I've read the first book in the Space Trilogy by C.S. Lewis, and that is Out of the Silent Planet. This book, again, it's dealing with sci-fi. It's like a space trilogy that he wrote. And I took a C.S. Lewis course back in college, so I knew a little bit about this first book. This first book follows a scientist. At least I'm remembering if he was a scientist, but his name is Dr. Ransom, and that's the person of the book. And he finds himself kidnapped and taken on a spaceship to this planet called Malacandra, which is our version of Mars. And he basically describes his time there, and the story goes on from there. I was engaged at the beginning from the book. My issue was how long the book did go with when it talked about descriptions. C.S. Lewis has a way of describing the environment, the landscape, and even all the creatures beautifully, but at times it felt like it dragged on too much for me. And I found like that was sort of my issue with the Chronicles of Narnia books, that some of the times where I did zone out were these long descriptions. So I'm not a huge fan of those. At least not with audio. I find that audio, you really have to pay attention. And so when he comes up with the theology or with the descriptions, it was hard to not zone out. So I will also say that when my husband and I were listening to the Out of the Silent Planet, as well as the next book, which is called Pearlandra, we were driving and we were going on a trip, and so our attention was kind of divided there. But that first book was a 3-star, and it was intrigued me enough at the ending to continue the series. So the second book was called Pearlandra, and that book I gave 2.5 stars. And this book talked about the planet Pearlandra, but Venus in our solar system. And basically the landscaping was all water and island type of landscaping, but this planet was more of a description of the Garden of Eden, so kind of like that parallel. And I thought that was interesting. I found that, again, we get those descriptions which were even longer in this book. This book was actually, I think, 2 hours longer than the first book. So it did drag with those descriptions, and I was not a fan of that. The theology in it was also, it was interesting. I don't really have much to say about that because, again, I was a little brain tired. Some of the points that were being made, it was just kind of just tiring for me, and so I don't really have much thought there. I do know that this book also was very action-packed towards the end, but it was also very gruesome. There are some parts in the book where it caught me off guard, and there is some violence in it. There is some animal violence. There's also some descriptiveness of a fight that happens that can get a little gruesome, but it wasn't enough to where I had to turn it off and say, okay, no more. But it did on my level kind of hit that a little gruesome point. So, but it does really talk about the fight of good over evil in this book. So I see what he was trying to do. So anyway, those are my thoughts with it. Since the second book was 2.5 stars, I decided I just didn't want to continue with that third book, especially when I saw that the third book was 7 hours extra from the second book. So I didn't feel like it was worth it. Granted, we did try to listen to these books in the span of 1 to 2 days. So maybe if we had broken it up, but it just felt like the book kind of dragged on, and just wasn't a fan. But besides that, I am curious to see other books written by C.S. Lewis. I just don't know if the science fiction collection is for me from his work. So moving right along to the last book I want to talk about, and that is my 4.5 stars, and I just finished it today. That is The Waterkeeper by Charles Martin. And this also fulfilled my prompt for Geisha, which is from Mulan. The cover of the book needs to be my favorite color, and so there's the green. But where did it begin with this book? It is very emotional. I had instances where I just could not put it down. I was like having emotional responses in how I was just gasping and just very caught up in what was going on. So this book is basically about a guy named Murphy. He lives alone. He meets this woman, and she is looking for her daughter, and then he's caught up in this modern day like human trafficking, like with young women. It is very emotional, like I said, but it is very hard. The topic that is brought here is a very hard topic, and I was at the edge of my seat. I will say the beginning of this book is a hard beginning, and even in the next chapters following, there are some touchy subjects. If you have any, triggers toward human trafficking, there's drug abuse, there's alcohol abuse, there's, some gun violence. There is a lot of stuff packed into this book, and I would suggest that you would read the trigger warnings first. But there were some things that were brought up that I realized that I didn't have. Like, I usually know what my trigger warnings are, but there were some things that were brought up that I had to take a second and just be like, okay, let me put that down, which hence, the 4.5 stars. But I will say that this book paints a beautiful picture of going for the one instead of the 99. And I think of that song, Reckless Love, that I forget, at the moment I can't remember who wrote the song, but Reckless Love, there's a verse in that song, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. And that's what I feel like the theme song is for this book, honestly. Yeah, just a lot happening. The minute details, I know I said 4.5 stars because I had to put it down, but my other thing was, and I can't give a lot away, but I wasn't too happy about the beginning part. I just found it a little weird with the young girl in the beginning and the man and how they first met and just how that happened. And that to me is it's just weird. And if I am upfront, if this was a secular book, I probably would have put the book down. But because I knew it was a Christian book, and in Christian books, there is a message, a meaning that if you dive in deeper, it will show. And it's always encouraging and hopeful, or there's bits of encouragement and hopefulness. I continue to read on. I also know that Oshina recommended this book, and she even mentioned that she had to get past through the first few chapters until she got through the book, and she really loved it. So that enough for me kept me going. But yes, if it had been a secular book when there didn't seem to be a rhyme or reason or any encouragement or any faith-filled encouragement picture, I probably would have put this book down. But yes, so be prepared going into it. That was a little long-winded, but those were my ratings, and I am planning on reading The Letter Keeper because this does end on a cliffhanger and I really want to know what happens. Anyway, those are the books, and I'm hoping to get a lot more reading done. If you have read any of these books, I would love to have a chat about it. Maybe there are some books here that you did in fact enjoy, or maybe there are some books that you also agree with me about you didn't quite enjoy, but I am curious on y'all's thoughts. So I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.